From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine on this Wednesday. I hope you are having a good start to your day, and obviously you are if you're watching the show this morning. And it's going to be an interesting topic. Chance for you to call in, join in the conversation if you'd like. But, you know, the big question that we continue to look at in Tennessee, and it's a problem nationwide, is the idea of human trafficking, human slavery, if you will, that word, and folks that end up in situations for a variety of reasons against their will. And it happens. It's stunning to me. And the TBI, very, very involved with it. We talk about it when we see, you know, potential child abduction cases, not just children's cases, but adults cases as well. And there are other organizations outside of, you know, the TBI that are involved with helping and dealing not only with stopping this and educating, but the victims as well when they are rescued, hopefully, and try to get reintegrated back into their lives. And we're going to talk about that this morning with a guest who is really probably one of the foremost experts on this topic anywhere, in part because of how much time she did spend as a special agent in charge with the TBI. With us this morning is Margie Quin. Good morning to you. It's good to see you.
Thanks.
Again.
It's great to be here again with you.
Well, gosh, I mean, more than 2 decades, you know, in law enforcement with the TBI for years. You and I remember, and the media in general, and you're always so good with the media, would be involved with cases where you're looking at child abductions and the like.
Right, we're looking at all kinds of things when it comes to human trafficking. Unfortunately, it's not necessarily as simple as an abduction that occurs. Most of the time, victims are lured, victims are romanced into that situation. And if they're very young children, it is most likely that they are being trafficked by a parent first. So if you're talking about a child under 12, again, it's the statistics tell us that those children are most likely trafficked by a parent. The FBI came out with a great report last week, and what they said was about 60% of these cases in the last year, juveniles are really being targeted by Facebook. They're being targeted, groomed, romanced via Facebook and other social media sites. And so we continue to try to kind of beat the drum of social media can be very dangerous for children. Yep. Online gaming, peer-to-peer gaming can be very dangerous for children. I like to say if you wouldn't let your child go out here on I-65 in rush hour traffic and play, you shouldn't let them play on the internet either. It is just as dangerous, if not more so.
It's amazing. You have to monitor it. My son was getting into some of those games because he was great, and we monitored him very closely, and you know, we're very cautious with that. That's great advice. Well, of course, Margie for years was with the TBI, and since then, you know, she retired, but didn't really, and she's now with End Slavery Tennessee, and just the title of that, End Slavery Tennessee, and some are going to hear that title and say, wait, slavery in Tennessee? And maybe you can talk a bit about that and the fact that this organization now is getting some $3.5 million from the state.
Right. We talk about human trafficking in terms of modern day slavery, and so you're talking about the purchase of a human being. Okay. And that is why it is called modern day slavery, and there are just as many people enslaved today as there have been over the, you know, hundreds of years.
I just find that hard to believe. When you say that, enslaved, do you mean folks that are against their will, that have been somehow coerced or taken and are being forced to do labor?
Exactly. We're talking about forced labor or forced sex, or in the case of a juvenile, commercial sex. Okay. Commercial sex is a sex act that occurs when something of value is exchanged. And so when that occurs, when a commercial sex act occurs and the person is under the age of 18, that is human trafficking. The government doesn't have to prove force, fraud, or coercion. We further, I think, demonstrated that and solidified that when we decriminalized prostitution for minors in 2011. The General Assembly said, we're not going to arrest kids anymore for prostitution. It's a crime they can't legally engage in to begin with, and we need to be really clear in our statutes and in our policy. These children are victims of crime, not offenders.
No doubt about it.
Right. No doubt about it.
So End Slavery Tennessee, just if you would, talk about the different services you provide, and again, what that money is going to go toward.
We have a comprehensive and our array of services, and our strategy is, we call it TAP, turning off the tap of human trafficking. It's an acronym, and it stands for Training, Advocacy, Aftercare, and Prevention. So we're training more than 20,000 professionals a year on how to identify, detect, prevent trafficking. One of those groups is our Tennessee public educators.
Right, I was gonna say teachers, sure.
Right. That law passed 3 years ago and was kind of reaffirmed this year in the General Assembly. We are about to roll out training for all of the Tennessee Department of Corrections and probation and parole, and that is a newer partnership with the state of Tennessee. So we're training a lot of frontline professionals on how to react to trafficking, what to do if they suspect trafficking. Advocacy, we're meeting with legislators, we're talking with the General Assembly, we're talking with the governor's office and other policymakers around what does really good policy look like? What do we need to do from a strategic standpoint to really try to go after a crime like trafficking? Aftercare, we have an array of services, wraparound services. In Slavery, Tennessee is the single point of contact for Middle Tennessee, which means that all referrals of victims come through in Slavery, Tennessee. From law enforcement, TBI, from the Department of Children's Services, we have memorandums of understanding, partnerships with these agencies to make sure we are getting referrals of the victims who are being targeted by this type of crime. And prevention. We have several great evidence-based programs that we do with juveniles. We work with juveniles who are in the community, in foster care, living with parents, living with guardians or relatives. We are working with children who are unfortunately incarcerated or in secure facilities, who we either suspect have been trafficked or have been confirmed to have been trafficked. Many juveniles and adults, once trafficked, are also committing what we call co-occurring crimes. And so it's unlikely that that's going to be the only criminal activity that you may be engaged in, whether it's prostitution or having been trafficked. There are other co-occurring crimes that are probably going to happen at the same time, like drug possession, thefts, simple assaults, stealing cars, those sort of, that sort of stuff. And so many times you see women in the criminal justice system or juveniles in the juvenile justice system who are committing status offenses. And those are great ways, great triggers for us, I think, to recognize when a child is being trafficked. And so prevention, delivering prevention programs to that population has become critically important. And so those are really the 4 pillars that we stand on to address trafficking in the state. Now, the $3.5 million that the governor's office is giving to us in an appropriation is going to allow us to expand and enhance the programming that we're delivering. We're going to be able to deliver more services, more people over a longer period of time.
Is this happening in every single county in the state? TBI is reporting that trafficking is occurring in every single county in our state. For real? Okay. I mean, obviously, you
100%.
think about the big cities, and of course, probably there, but some like Pickett County or any of these Henry counties, way out in the middle of nowhere, maybe that's happening there as well.
Absolutely.
So, if you would, okay, so that's great. You get more money to expand the service, but just so I understand this, is this organized crime? Is it a syndicate? Are there groups that do this? Is it just an individual that maybe on his or her own decide to try to traffic in children or whatever? I mean, how organized is it, and why is it maybe so difficult to just go after these scumbags, which is exactly what they are?
Right. So yes to all the above. They're all those things.
But it's a syndicate. So do we know who they are, what they are? Is it organized crime?
We know there is some organized crime. There are also individuals who are trafficking people.
Just individuals get started on their own. They're little entrepreneurs.
Little entrepreneurs, yes.
Illegal business.
There are also family members who traffic children. And we call that familial trafficking. And again, if a child is under the age of 12, it's most likely that child has been trafficked by a family member, at least first. That was their introduction.
For what? I mean, it's mind-boggling to think that a parent, especially a mother or father, would traffic their child for sex. So obviously there's something very sick about these individuals. Is it because they're hooked on drugs? Because they've been threatened? Is it just that they're unethical, awful, evil people? What is it?
So I think there are 2 things I would say. Most likely it's addiction.
Okay.
There's addiction at the root of that issue. If mother's trafficking a daughter, there are probably 2 things going on. One is she's an addict and she's selling the child to get money or in trade for drugs. The second part of that is it is likely that she was also trafficked. That I'm not making an excuse for that mother, but we do see a lot of generational trafficking in the state, and that is unfortunately a thing. But what we've got to do is put in place programs, strategies, in order to break that cycle, break that historical cycle of trafficking and sexual abuse and sexual assault.
Get them off the drugs, and that's easier said than done, of
Right.
course. It's just what's so disgusting about this, beyond obviously the folks that are involved with it, you know, trafficking. Unfortunately, and it's got to be a head scratcher for you at some point, but you understand this better than most. There is a market for this, meaning that they're providing a service. It would not exist if there were not people seeking this. And that's what just blows my mind. And you're sitting at home thinking, Nick, you're naive. And yeah, you're right. Maybe I'm not really. I understand it's out there. But there's a market for this. We were talking yesterday with Special Agent from the TBI about, does no one watch To Catch a Predator? I mean, these idiots still respond to these ads to have sex with a child. And they're busted. Obviously, there's a lot of it going on where you can't be everywhere at once and they get away with it. There's a market for that. What the heck's going on? What is the sickness? And it's predominantly men, a vast majority of men. Very rarely any woman involved in this. It's men seeking this stuff out. What the heck is wrong?
Yeah, so we described this, and Jeremy may have talked about it yesterday, as a supply and demand issue.
Right. If there was no demand, this would not happen. They're in it for the money.
Right. This is 100% preventable in the like from the angle that we can prevent men from buying women and children for sex. I think men sometimes convince themselves that this is not doing harm to this person. This is doing incredible harm, even if you think that the person that you're purchasing is willing. And I use quotation marks because most people who have any other choice, if there's any other choice on the table, any other cards on the table that they could play, they'd play them.
Right.
And so this idea that women choose to engage in prostitution, that this is a valid career choice, are misinformed, I think, about the realities of commercial sex and prostitution. We know now, and I can tell you just from 26 years in law enforcement, this is certainly not the way I thought about it 20 years ago, but with education and training and a greater understanding of what happens to these women and children during a trafficking or during a commercial sex event is catastrophic to that person, and we need to try to educate people as to what the realities of that are. If we didn't have a demand for children to have sex with, we wouldn't have seen 18 men arrested in Spring Hill. We wouldn't have seen 26, I think, men arrested 2 weeks prior to that in Nashville. And if they went out next week, you'd get a similar number. They were in Obion County about 2 months ago and arrested double. I mean, it's happening everywhere.
Again and again.
Urban or rural. Men will travel. The first time we ran an operation like this at the TBI, after the law was signed where we could pose as a minor, that was in 2016, March of 2016, we were the next week in a hotel room in Knoxville running a covert operation. And the first 2 men that we arrested were youth pastors. So I think there's this, this is not surprising.
No, listen, we have to take a break, but you're absolutely right. You mentioned it's youth pastors. A lot of people think, oh, well, they're just the dregs that are showing up. No. You have all types of people across all socioeconomic scales, professionals, businessmen, blue collar, white collar, responding to this, and it's just horrible. We'll take a break on that. When we come back, I want to talk more about the End Slavery Tennessee. We're going to take some phone calls. We have the lines open if you have questions or comments. And I think Margie Quin also, based on her background and what she's doing now, has some interesting insight into some of these high-profile cases involving children, from Joe Clyde Daniels to the current case involving Summer Wells. A lot of questions around her disappearance. It's been a month and still not a trace of her. What might be up there? We'll get your thoughts on that and more. We'll take your calls right after this. Stay with us.